Obese mail-order bride was left in tears at station till the little girl said, "My papa needs you." The last whistle of the train faded into the horizon, carried off by the desert wind like a wounded bird's cry. The iron beast shrank to a speck of smoke, leaving behind only the rattle of loose rails and the dry groan of wood beneath the station platform. Dust stirred across the empty tracks, settling in the folds of a woman's skirt. Clara May sat on the splintered bench, hands folded over her lap, thumbs nervously twisting a ribbon-tied letter already soft from being read too many times. Her Sunday dress, stitched for the promise of a new life, clung to her body in the unforgiving heat. Sweat gathered beneath her bonnet and trailed down her neck, but still she waited, stiff-backed, eyes fixed on the road that ran from town. He was late, but he would come. He had to. The words from the letter pressed against her mind like scripture. "I seek a wife of strong heart, one who will stand beside me in this harsh land. In return, I offer a home, a name, and a place to belong." A place to belong. She had built her whole courage on those words, packed her few belongings, boarded the train, and traveled west with hope swelling bigger than her fears. But now the platform was empty, save for the eyes. They came in flickers, men leaning against posts, women pausing with baskets, children whispering with cruel delight. Their gazes clung to Clara, heavy as stones, dragging shame up her spine. A boy, freckles sharp against his sunburnt skin, pointed at her and smirked. Another mimicked the swell of her frame with stuffed cheeks, earning snickers from his friends. Clara kept her chin high, but her fingers dug into the letter until the paper crumpled. Each tick of the station clock sounded louder, sharper, like the slow cutting of a rope. Minutes bled into hours. The sun began to dip, staining the sky with fire. No wagon came, no rider, no groom with outstretched hand. Her heart sagged, heavy as the lead weights she once saw blacksmiths hammering back east. She imagined him, whoever he was, reading her letter, laughing at her words, tossing it to the fire. Perhaps he had seen her picture, the one she had begged a seamstress to soften, and decided she was not worth the trouble. Perhaps he had never existed at all. The laughter of children pricked her ears. Their voices rose like coyotes circling a wounded thing. One sang a cruel rhyme, another spat near her shoes. Clara pressed her shawl to her face, shoulders shaking though she tried to still them. The scent of dust, coal, and her own shame filled her lungs till it hurt to breathe. The dream she carried across miles collapsed, brittle as dry wood underfoot. Her tears fell onto the ribbon of the letter, darkening the fabric. Then, soft as a bird landing, another weight brushed her skirt. A small hand. Clara lowered the shawl. Standing before her was a girl, no more than 7, with braids frayed by dust and a dress patched too many times. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt, her eyes wide, solemn and strangely old for their size. The girl tugged once, gently, then whispered, "Please, miss, my papa needs you." The words cut through the jeers, through the silence, through Clara's despair. They carried no mockery, no judgment, only urgency, only need. Clara blinked at her, stunned. The girl's voice trembled, but her grip did not. Those eyes, grey as river stones, pleaded in a way that stirred something deep, something Clara thought she had buried beneath ridicule and rejection. She glanced around, half expecting a trick, some cruel jest. But the crowd had grown bored, drifting back to their business. The platform belonged only to her, the fading sun, and this child, with a voice like a prayer. "Who is your papa?" Clara managed, her voice raw from unshed sobs. The girl shook her head, braids swinging, and whispered again, firmer this time, "Please, he needs you." The desperation in those small words struck deeper than the laughter of 100 townsfolk. Clara's heart, moments ago hollowed, now beat with a fragile spark. She looked into the child's eyes, and in them she saw not pity, not scorn, but belief. Belief that she was wanted, belief that she was needed. And though Clara May did not yet know where that path would lead, her hand rose, trembling, unsure, and she let the little girl's fingers close around her own. The station behind her grew quiet. The ribbon-tied letter slipped from her lap, carried off by the wind into the tracks. Ahead, the child pulled gently, leading her into the deepening dusk, toward a destiny she had not chosen, but one that waited all the same. Clara's breath caught. Her heart, though cracked, whispered back to the silence. Perhaps. This is why I came west. And with that step, her tears dried on her cheeks, leaving salt marks like battle scars. The girl tightened her hold, and Clara followed. Into the unknown, into need. The road out of town bled into wilderness, a crooked path where wagon ruts had long ago dried into stone. Clara followed the little girl, her bonnet clutched against the wind as the sky dimmed from gold to ash gray. Each step carried her farther from the jeering crowd, deeper into a silence that pressed like a weight upon her chest. Ellie's small hand never let go. For someone so slight, the child pulled with certainty, as though the land itself bent to her knowledge. The girl did not chatter. Only the scuff of her boots on dirt, the call of a lone hawk overhead, and Clara's own labored breaths filled the evening. The outskirts stretched barren, sagebrush twisting like old bones, fence posts leaning half-broken, the horizon endless. Clara's skirts dragged dust, her feet sore, but the girl marched on without pause until the house appeared. It stood on a rise, grey against the dying light, a ranch battered by storms and time. Shingles were missing, shutters hung loose, and the barn sagged as though it had given up years ago. Wind moaned through cracks in the walls, carrying with it the scent of dry timber and old sorrow. Ellie's steps quickened. She tugged Clara through the crooked gate, across a yard where weeds grew tall among forgotten tools. At the door, the girl paused, then pushed it open with a creak that echoed like a groan of the dead. Inside, shadows stretched long. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of smoke, leather, and something faintly metallic, blood, or maybe rust. Broken furniture hunched in corners. A rocking chair lay toppled, and on the mantel rested a rifle, polished though unused. At the table sat a man. Jonah's heart did not rise when they entered. His broad shoulders slumped forward, one hand curled around a chipped mug, the other resting on a cane propped against his chair. His face bore the marks of both sun and sorrow. Lines carved deep, a beard that bristled untamed, and eyes the color of steel struck cold on an anvil. Those eyes lifted, measuring Clara, not cruelly, not kindly, just weighing her as one might weigh a stranger who carried both burden and mystery. Ellie whispered, almost like confession, "Papa, this is her." Jonas's gaze lingered. Then it fell, heavy as stone, back to his mug. His voice, when it came, was low and gravel-edged, shaped by battles no man wins. "I didn't send for you." The words struck Clara harder than the train's whistle that had left her behind. Her fingers tightened on her shawl. Twice in a day. Twice rejected. Heat burned her cheeks, though no fire glowed in this room. Jonas set the mug down with a dull thud. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the cane, though he did not rise. "But maybe," he said after a long silence, "God did." The pause that followed was heavier than any sentence. Clara lowered her gaze. The shame inside her swelled. Her body too large for any dress. Her dreams too fragile to bear such blows. She wanted to retreat, to turn back toward the tracks. But Ellie's small hand found hers again. The child's grip was firm, desperate, as if she feared Clara might vanish. Like smoke. "She died last winter," Ellie whispered, eyes downcast. "Mama." The cold took her. Clara's breath caught. She looked at Jonas then, but he did not meet her eyes. His jaw was clenched, the scar on his cheek deepening in shadow. His silence told more than words. Grief had carved him hollow. Left him a shell with only duty clinging to bone. He shifted, wincing as his bad leg protested. The cane scraped the floor, a reminder of battles past, whether war or ranch Clara could not yet tell. His voice came again, sharp in its brevity. "I don't ask for love. Just keep the girl safe. Keep the house alive." The words dropped into the room like stones into a dry well. Dull, echoing, final. Clara swallowed hard. She felt the ache of rejection pulse again, yet Ellie pressed closer against her side, as if begging without words. The house felt less like a home than a tomb, air heavy with ghosts. Still, within that silence something stirred. A faint current, need, loneliness, perhaps even the roots of belonging, ran through them all. Jonas finally looked at Clara again, his gray eyes narrowing as though seeing not her figure, but the will in her spine. He said nothing more, only nodded once. A soldier's concession, not a welcome. Clara lowered her shawl. She breathed in the dust, the sorrow, the echo of what this house had once been, and for reasons she could not yet name, she did not step back. She stayed. Ellie leaned into her, small arms wrapping around Clara's waist with a fierceness that felt like a vow. And in that quiet embrace, among shadows and scars, the first fragile thread of a bond was tied between a grieving child, a broken man, and a woman who had long believed there was no place in this world for her beauty. The house stood silent, but no longer empty. The days stretched long beneath the prairie sun, each dawn spilling gold across a land both cruel and breathtaking. Clara May woke with the first rooster crow, pulling on an apron already stiff with yesterday's work. She fetched water from the well, her arms aching with the weight of the pails. She patched shirts with thread frayed thin as her patience. She kneaded dough until her palms burned, sweat dampening her brow while the oven's heat pressed close. It was not glamour. It was survival. Ellie trailed her often, small feet padding in the dust, laughter spilling like bright bells into the hollow rooms. The girl's joy was stubborn, a defiance against grief. Each giggle chipped away at Clara's shame, softening. Wounds carved by cruel words. But the world outside the ranch was less kind. On her rare trips into town, whispers followed Clara like shadows. Women on porches tilted their heads, eyes raking her figure. Men spat tobacco and muttered, "Heart brought home a whale." Children mimicked her gait, puffing cheeks in ridicule. The gossip stuck to her skin like burrs, pricking long after. She returned home. Clara bore it quietly, though at night, when the house slept, she pressed her shawl to her mouth to stifle sobs. Still, she worked. Still, she stayed. Jonas said little. He moved through the house like a ghost bound by duty, limp dragging behind him, cane tapping a rhythm of endurance. At times he watched her, measuring, questioning. But his words were few, his face unreadable. It was Ellie who bridged the silence. Her laughter filled the ranch with a music neither adult could conjure. Sometimes she wrapped her arms around Clara's waist without warning, whispering, "Don't go." And Clara, holding her close, knew she could not, even if shame urged her to flee. One evening, as the wind rattled loose shutters and coyotes howled beyond the ridge, the three of them gathered by the fire. Shadows danced across the walls, flames crackling like secrets too long held. Jonas sat with his legs stretched stiff, polishing his rifle. Clara mended socks by the glow, while Ellie dozed against her lap. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the fire's hiss. Clara's hands stilled on the fabric. She stared into the flames, words rising like smoke she could no longer choke back. "Back east," she began, voice low. "I was always less than a woman. Men saw me as something to laugh at, something too much and never enough. No hand ever reached for mine without mockery behind it." Her eyes glistened. "When I answered that ad, it was not for love. It was for a place, any place. To belong." The confession trembled in the air, raw and aching. She dared not look at Jonas, afraid of steel in his eyes. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Jonas set the rifle aside, leaning back into shadow. His face was half hidden, but his voice carried the weight of a man carved hollow by sorrow. "The war took my leg," he said at last, words falling heavy, measured. His gaze drifted to Ellie, sleeping softly. "Then it took my wife. We all carry ghosts." The truth settled between them, thick as smoke. Clara felt her breath catch, not from pity but recognition. His silence had not been rejection. It was grief, the same storm that howled in her bones. She looked at him then, truly looked, not at the limp nor the scars, but at the man bound by loss, still standing when others would have crumbled. And in that fragile moment, she felt a mirror of her own heart. Two broken vessels, yet somehow holding the same storm within. The fire burned low, shadows lengthening. Jonas cleared his throat, shifting stiffly. He reached for the rifle again, then paused. His eyes met hers, softer now, though still guarded. "Ever shot one of these?" he asked. Clara shook her head, startled. He pushed the weapon across the table. "Then it's time you learned. Out here, even the walls don't protect you." The night air bit cold as they stepped outside. The yard lay quiet under a pale moon, barn looming in darkness. Jonas steadied himself, placing the rifle in Clara's hands. It felt heavy, unfamiliar, wood rough beneath her palms. "Hold firm," he instructed, moving closer. His hand brushed hers as he adjusted her grip, his touch brief, yet sparking something deep, something unspoken. Her heart thudded louder than the coyote's cries. She raised the rifle, breath trembling, finger hovering uncertain. Jonas leaned near, his voice low, almost gentle. "Trust yourself." The shot cracked through the night, echoing off the hills. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but she did not stumble. Smoke curled from the barrel, drifting skyward like the ghosts they both carried. Jonas nodded once. Approval, quiet but unmistakable. Clara lowered the weapon, chest heaving, eyes bright, not from the shot but from what it meant. That perhaps she was not just burden, not just mockery. Perhaps she was strength. Their hands brushed again as he took the rifle back. Neither spoke. The silence held more than words ever could. Trust, fragile and new, yet alive. And in that moment, under the vast, haunted sky, something deeper than survival began to take root. The warning came first as a tremor in the dirt, faint but steady, like thunder rolling from the belly of the earth. Clara had been hanging linens in the yard, her hands raw from wash water, when she felt it under her. Boots. A moment later, the sound followed. The pounding of hooves, fierce and unrelenting, scattering birds from the fence line. She froze, clothespins slipping from her fingers. Ellie clutched her skirts, wide-eyed. The horizon spat out riders, dark silhouettes against the afternoon glare. Dust curled behind them like smoke from hell's own fire. Jonas stepped out onto the porch, cane in hand, rifle leaning on his shoulder. His jaw tightened as the men drew near. Clara saw it in his eyes, recognition, and something darker, the hay. Gang reined in hard before the yard, horses snorting, eyes rolling white. 6 men, leather cracked and patched, guns glinting in holsters. At their head was a broad-shouldered rider with a scar cutting across his mouth, twisting his grin into something wolfish. "Well," the leader drawled, spitting into the dust, "if it ain't Jonas Hart, thought you'd buried yourself in this godforsaken hole." Jonas's voice came even, though his knuckles whitened on the cane. "You've no business here, Kincaid." The scarred man laughed, sharp as broken glass. "Oh, I got business plenty. Debt don't vanish, Hart. War don't erase what you owe." He swung down from his horse, boots thudding heavy. His gaze slid past Jonas, fixing on Clara. The grin widened. "And what's this? Brought yourself a hog bride to warm the bed?" The others chuckled, cruel and low. Clara's face burned, shame rising like fire in her throat. Ellie pressed tighter against her, trembling. Jonas stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the men and his family. "Leave her out of this." But Kincaid circled, his boots crunching the gravel. "No, see, she's part of it now. Pretty picture, Hart. The cripple vet, the fat sow, and the little orphan. Not much of a ranch, but it'll fetch something when we strip it down." Jonas lifted the rifle, not quite aiming, but enough to still the laughter. His voice came low, dangerous. "You'll not take this land while I'm breathing." The standoff stretched, thick as a storm cloud. Finally, Kincaid spat again, eyes narrowing. "Then we'll come back. And every time we do, we'll take a little more until you got nothing left but dust." With a whistle, he mounted up. The gang wheeled their horses, hooves tearing the earth as they thundered back into the distance, leaving behind silence and the taste of fear. Clara stood rigid, her heart pounding louder than the departing hoofbeats. Jonas lowered the rifle, but his shoulders sagged with the weight of years pressing down. That night, Clara lay awake on her cot, staring at the ceiling's warped boards. Through the thin walls, voices carried from Jonas's room, low, strained. "Pa, she helps," Ellie pleaded. "She makes the house less empty." Jonas's reply was rough, choked. "She don't belong here, Ellie. Those men, they'll tear her apart. Best she leaves before worse comes." Clara's breath caught. Each word drove a splinter deeper into her chest. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears brimming but silent. For the second time since stepping off that train, she was marked as unwanted. Yet beneath the pain, something else stirred. Resolve. She had been mocked, shunned, abandoned. But still she stood. Still she worked. And now, as danger coiled around the ranch, Clara realized she did not want to run. Not from the girl who clung to her, not from the house that, in its silence, had begun to breathe again. By morning, the threats became more than words. A section of fence lay splintered, rails broken clean through. 2 cattle were gone, hooves tracked into the ravine. At dusk, Clara glimpsed movement near the barn, shadows slipping away before she could cry alarm. Fear licked at her spine, but anger burned hotter. She patched the fence with her own hands, rope biting her palms. She hauled water for the remaining stock, jaw set tight. Each act of labor became defiance, each bruise a declaration. This ranch would not be stolen while she drew breath. Ellie followed her, eyes wide, learning strength not from Jonas's rifle but from Clara's stubborn endurance. The child's laughter still rang, but now it carried steel beneath its sweetness. Jonas watched in silence, his face unreadable. Yet more than once, Clara caught his gaze lingering, not with scorn, but with a weight she could not name, as the sun bled red across the prairie sky. Clara stood at the fence line, hair tangled in the wind, hands raw and blistered. Behind her, the ranch sagged, but endured, just as she did. She had come west, seeking belonging. Now, for the first time, she felt the stirring of something greater, a home worth fighting for. And as the coyotes howled in the distance, Clara knew the wolves were circling closer. But she would not cower. Her strength, long mocked, had become her shield. The night split open with the crack of gunfire and the thunder of hooves. Clara woke to Ellie's scream, the smell of smoke already clawing at her throat. She stumbled from her cot, skirts tangling at her ankles, and saw it. Orange light spilling across the windows, flickering wild. The gang had returned. Outside, dry fields burned like kindling, flames racing on the prairie wind. The sky glowed red, a hellish dome swallowing stars. Shadows of riders galloped the fence line, their laughter carrying sharp over the roar of fire. Jonas burst through the door, rifle in hand, his limp dragging him forward with desperate speed. His face hard in the glow, twisted with fury. "Stay." "Inside!" he barked. But already Clara was grabbing Ellie's hand, shoving her beneath the table. The heat thickened, choking. Sparks danced into the yard, landing on shingles, hissing against the barn roof. Jonas fired into the night, the blast swallowed by the inferno. His leg buckled as he braced, and Clara saw him falter, saw him drop to one knee, hand clawing for balance. Her heart seized. Without thought, she plunged into the smoke. The air tore at her lungs, searing raw, but she reached him, her arms heavy, strong. She heaved him upward, his weight near buckling her knees. "Go!" she gasped, dragging him step by grinding step toward the house. Jonas struggled, shame on his face, but he could not stand without her. Clara's muscles burned, yet something deeper fueled her. Not duty, not fear, but a will she had never known she carried. Behind them, the barn timbers shrieked, flames devouring dry wood. Ellie's scream cut through the night, piercing as any bullet. "Papa! Clara!" The barn door sagged, smoke belching black. Ellie had run for the horses. The roof sagged, beams glowing red as coals. "Ellie!" Jonas roared, trying to tear free, but his leg collapsed under him. Clara did not hesitate. She lunged into the barn, the heat slamming against her skin, firelight bending the air. She saw the girl through smoke, coughing, eyes wide, clutching a panicked mare's halter. Clara barreled forward, skirts catching. Cinders. She scooped Ellie into her arms, hauling her tight against her chest. The horse bolted past them, hooves striking sparks. Overhead the rafters groaned, a death knell. With every ounce of strength, Clara charged through the haze. Jonas appeared at the doorway, reaching, bellowing her name. Together they stumbled clear as the roof caved, fire exploding into the sky. They collapsed in the dirt, the three of them huddled as the barn roared into ruin. Clara's arms trembled around Ellie, skin blistered from sparks, hair singed. Jonas's breath rasped, chest heaving. The world narrowed to coughing, sobbing, the crackle of fire. Hours later, silence. The flames died down to blackened husks, ash drifting on the wind like gray snow. The ranch was scarred, fence gone, barn gutted, fields charred. The land they had fought to hold lay broken, yet still it stood. Jonas sat in the ruins, face streaked with soot, shoulders bowed. For the first time since Clara had met him, the iron in his voice gave way. "I thought you were a burden," he rasped, eyes shining with something rawer than pain. He turned to her, each word trembling. "But you're the only thing holding us up." The confession cracked open something in him. His hand rose, slow and reverent, trembling as it brushed her cheek. Not pity, not resignation, reverence, as though her strength was a grace he had never deserved. Clara wept openly, ashing, streaking her tears. Her voice broke, yet carried like a prayer. "I came here unwanted, but maybe I was sent here needed." The night around them was ruined, yet in that hollow, a seed bloomed. Jonas leaned forward, his lips pressing to hers. Fragile, aching, yet alive. Fire had taken much, but from its ashes, something fierce and tender rose. For the first time, Clara felt not like a weight to be borne, but a woman to be cherished. And for the first time, Jonas let himself be held by more than grief. Together, in the ruin, love found its beginning. The fire had blackened the fields, but dawn brought new light. For days the town whispered that Jonas Hart's ranch was finished, that the cripple, the orphan, and the hog bride would pack up and vanish like smoke. But when Sunday bells tolled, something else stirred curiosity. They gathered. Men with dust on their boots, women with sharp eyes and tighter tongues, children dangling off wagon rails. They came to see ashes, to mock the ruin. Instead, they saw survival. The barn was a charred frame, the fences rough with hurried mending, but smoke no longer rose. Instead, Clara May stood before the house, sleeves rolled, face bronzed from sun and labor. Her figure, once the subject of cruel whispers, now seemed different, not diminished, but rooted, solid as the earth beneath her. Strength cloaked in gentleness. Ellie darted at her side, braids swinging, cheeks smudged with flour. The girl clutched Clara's hand as if it were a lifeline. When neighbors bent low to greet her, Ellie lifted her chin proudly and declared, "This is my mama." The word rang louder than church bells. A hush followed, the crueler women pressing lips tight. No laughter came. The weight of the child's truth silenced every tongue. Jonas limped from the barn, his cane striking dust. His face bore soot scars, his leg dragged heavier than before, yet his shoulders carried something new. He walked to Clara's side before the watching town. For a moment, only the wind spoke, rustling through charred grass. Then Jonas reached for her hand. Calloused fingers folded into hers, strong despite their tremble. His voice came raw, not raised, yet it carried across the crowd like a vow. "She was never sent for me," he said. His steel-gray gaze swept the onlookers, then settled on Clara. "She was sent for us." The words cracked through silence like thunder rolling across open plains. In their wake, something shifted. The jeers that once trailed Clara turned to bowed heads, shamed glances, quiet respect. No one dared answer mockery into such truth. Clara's throat ached with unshed tears. She had not dreamed of grand speeches, nor of townfolk bending their judgment. She only wanted to belong. And here, in the rough clasp of Jonas's hand and the trust of Ellie's small fingers, belonging found her. The crowd dispersed slowly, not with laughter, but with reverence, carrying whispers different than before. Where once she was the punchline of cruel jests, now she was a story, a woman who had stood in the fire and not broken. That evening, the ranch fell quiet again. The sun sagged low, bleeding gold across the prairie sky, its light catching on every scar the land bore. Clara sat on the porch. Ellie curled against her, already asleep, the child's breath warm against her side. Jonas lowered himself into the chair beside her, movements stiff, but his eyes softer than she had ever known. Together they watched. The horizon burn itself into night. The silence that spread was no longer heavy, no longer a tomb. It was a blanket, gentle, shared. Clara's gaze drifted to the girl in her arms, then to the man at her shoulder. She thought of the train station, of the ribbon-tied letter, of the shame that had once been her only companion. She thought of fire and ash, of laughter turned cruel, of hands that had finally chosen to hold instead of cast aside. The wind moved across the land, stirring charred stalks into a whisper. To Clara, it felt like a hymn, the voice of all who had gone before, promising that what was broken could still be made whole. For the first time, Clara belonged. Not because of what she looked like, not because she had been chosen in pity. She belonged because she was needed, because she had given herself, because she had become family. And as the last light bled from the sky, Clara closed her eyes, her cheek pressed to Ellie's hair, Jonas's hand resting warm over hers. The house of silence was silent still, but now the silence held no loneliness, only love.